As the famous saying goes, it was all good just a week ago. What up, everyone? Welcome back to Knicks in 4, where we talk everything Knicks. I'm your host, Ayers. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying what you're watching, please feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's get into it. So, while I would love to sit here and tell you guys how surprised I am, I'm not. I'm not surprised at all. In vintage Knicks fashion, we went from having an 8-game winning streak to now having an ongoing 5-game losing streak. Now, to be fair, I believe the main reasons why we have been experiencing this slump is obviously injuries. We've had injuries to 2 out of our 3 best players on the roster, that being RJ Barrett and Jalen Brunson. But what has become apparent is that there are still some glaring issues that we still need to talk about and discuss and shed some light on. Now, before we get into the issues that I think the Knicks need to figure out sooner than later, let's take a look at these 5 losses that we've endured over the past week or so. So we have losses against the Toronto Raptors, Chicago Bulls, Philadelphia 76ers, Dallas Mavericks, and most recently last night against the San Antonio Spurs. Now, going back to that first game of this losing streak, the Toronto Raptors game, that was a tough game. Toronto is obviously a team that's in our division, so there's always going to be some, battles going on, whether who has the advantage or not. That's a team that always plays us tough, and we always seem to either get lucky with a victory or just miss out on a victory. And that was a loss. I wouldn't really contribute much to that. We tried our best, and we just ended up on the wrong side of the victory with a loss. Now the game against Chicago, however, that was a game where RJ Barrett arguably had his greatest game of his career, definitely his best game of the season. And it sucks because, when a player on any team puts up a performance like that, you obviously want to win that game. So, RJ's 44 points, just goes away without any real credit because obviously we didn't come away with the victory. We lost that game. And that was a game that I believe we could have won had we made some different decisions down the stretch. So we lost that game, which is a game that we should have won. We lost against Philly. Again, you're going up against a team that has 2 established superstars. So while the Knicks had a few good quarters, I believe they played, they were actually up the first 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter came along and they, just fell to, not having superstars. So that was a game that we definitely probably wouldn't have won anyway. So I'll attribute that as a fair loss. Now here, whereas the, bad play comes in more. So we played against Dallas Wednesday night this past week, and that was a game that we blew completely. I mean, we were literally supposed to win that game. I believe we were up 9 points with something like 30 seconds left in the game. So to lose that game, being up that big with that much time left is unheard of. In fact, I believe we set a record for a team being up as many points with so much little time left and still end up losing. So that was very disappointing. We let Luka Doncic go for 60, 20, and 10, something ridiculous like that, which is very troubling, considering the fact that he's the only guy out there that can, give it to you like that. And we would just let him get to the line, doing whatever he wanted, and they prevailed. And last night we lost against San Antonio, which is inexcusable if you ask me. I mean, you have a team in San Antonio who doesn't have any stars. I believe their most talented guy was out, Devin Vassell. And, we were playing San Antonio in their house. So obviously every team has somewhat of a home court advantage, but clearly the Knicks, in my mind, and I believe in many people's minds, are a better team than the Spurs. And we just didn't have it that night. That whole game, we didn't play with much effort, much intensity, and the Spurs appeared to want it more. So we lost that game, which is a game we should have won. Now, looking at these 5 games in totality, again, I believe that the Toronto loss was a true loss. The Chicago game we should have won. The Philly game, true loss. We should have won the Dallas game, and we definitely should have won the San Antonio game. So while we have this 5-game losing streak, I believe we should have had a better faring, maybe like a 3-2, 3 wins, 2 losses over this stretch. Now, again, going back to what I believe were the main issues for these losses, losing Jalen Brunson, it has become quite clear, I mentioned this in videos in the past, that Jalen Brunson is definitely the best player on this team. He's the point guard. He's our floor general. So to lose a guy like that on any team, any situation, is going to really be detrimental to the success of your organization. And clearly, losing Jalen Brunson, not having him out there with our guys, is a huge impact. And to be honest with you, I don't know how much success we can have without Jalen Brunson at this point. We go ahead and lose RJ. Now, I have my feelings about RJ. I think he should be a lot better than what he's giving us. But RJ, over this last month, I would say RJ is starting to, turn into form, starting to, wear out the kinks. And he's been playing very well. So props to RJ. So to lose RJ and Jalen, again, 2 out of our 3 best players, it hurts. The Knicks are a team that has some depth, but we have a coach that doesn't really like to utilize that depth. And that's what I pretty much want to get into today in terms of the other issues that this team has been having. And that revolves around Cam Reddish. Now, recently I've been making a lot of videos about Cam. One of my last videos, I made a video about his status with the team, that we pretty much have reached a conclusion that he's a goner. He's going to get traded at some point before the trade deadline. And, with that being said, while I agree that it's time to probably, go our separate ways, we are in a situation where we are experiencing an emergency. We have guys that are out, and we need Cam to play. I mean, are we trying to win or are we trying to lose? It's really not clear at this point. I just want to go to a tweet from Fred Katz. This was a few weeks ago when Cam was first benched. This is where Fred Katz reports from Twitter. Tom Thibodeau said Cam Reddish didn't play tonight because Tibbs wanted to get a 9-man rotation and Reddish was odd man out. When asked as if it was because of Reddish's defensive performance versus Dallas, he said, "I don't want to put anything on one guy. I don't believe in that." So that was Thibodeau's defense on his decision-making as to why Cam wasn't playing, a few weeks ago. But, going into the future, into the present point now, that reason doesn't make any sense because now we have guys like RJ and Jalen out. So if it was a matter of, you wanted to roll with a 9-man rotation, which is, fine. I don't have any real arguments against that. I think when you have a shorter rotation, it gives players the opportunity to be more comfortable in their roles. And there's no confusion on who gets what minutes. Every guy knows that I'm coming in at a certain point. I'm guaranteed a certain amount of minutes, whether I start the game more or I finish the game. They can, pretty much understand their role with the team. So while that's fine, now you got guys injured. So a 9-man rotation with all of your players, your main guys healthy, that makes sense. But when you have, again, RJ out, Jalen Brunson out, you still want to do a 9-man rotation, but clearly Cam has not even touched the floor. Now, this became even more of an evident issue last game when we saw Evan Fournier come into the game. Now, I believe that Evan Fournier is in sort of the same position as Cam Reddish in terms of the Knicks organization being done with him and pretty much signing off unofficially at this point that they're going to move away from him, whether that's moving him in the trade deadline or maybe in the offseason. The Knicks are at that point where they're done with Evan Fournier. So to see Evan be inserted into the game yesterday, I'm thinking like, okay, if Evan can be inserted, why can't Cam be inserted? You got Deuce McBride out there, who I'm a fan of. Love his tenacity. I always think of him as like a honey badger, small guy, but very tough. You got Miles McBride out there playing 30-plus minutes a game when clearly he's not that guy. Miles McBride is a sort of offset defensive presence where you throw him out there, to distract a few people, get a couple of steals here and there, but he shouldn't be a focal point of any rotation, and he's been getting tons of minutes. I believe it was in the, not the San Antonio game, but the Dallas game. He had something like 40-plus minutes, which is ridiculous. Now, again, I like Miles McBride, but he's playing out of his position. Now, clearly, you have a guy sitting on the bench in Cam Reddish who is everything you need in this situation. He's a wing, and obviously you have two of your wings out that you really need to win, victories. So it's become clear to me that this is a little bit deeper than what it's presented to be. Now, Tom Thibodeau, clearly, I think we can all agree, isn't a Cam Reddish fan. But why? What is the real reason why he's being benched? Is it because of his play, which I believe Cam has stepped it up in his games early in the season. So it can be because of his play. Is it because, of this 9-man rotation? Clearly, that's been proven against, given the fact that Evan played last night and we have guys that are injured. So we clearly need help in an emergency situation that we're in. So what it says to me is that this is political. Now, whether it's the Knicks side of things where there's like, oh, we don't want to play him because we don't want to injure him and ruin our chances of trading him. Or is it something like maybe Cam's camp? I believe he's a Rich Paul client. And we know how Rich Paul clients are, it's very controversial, always something going along. We know how the whole Anthony Davis situation played out with, New Orleans and LA. But is it a Cam Reddish camp issue? Is it, some sort of request from his camp saying that, okay, you didn't play our guy when he was supposed to be played, so he's done for you guys. We don't want him playing a single game, any more minutes for the Knicks organization at this point going further. That's the only reason to me that's justifiable to why he hasn't played. But if it isn't that reason, and it's purely a reason that Tom Thibodeau is making the sole decision as a coach to not play him, then that's a big problem, because why are we playing games right now? Now, I believe that this Knicks regime, the front office, including Tom Thibodeau, has made an effort to try to win now. So if you're in a win now mode, you're trying to win games. Meanwhile, you're sitting a guy who clearly gives you a better chance to win, especially given the fact that you got guys injured. So it just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Hopefully this is a situation that is resolved, because it's becoming quite glaring what's going on here, and I don't like it one bit. So that's the Cam issue. Again, ongoing with Cam. I believe we're going to have issues with Cam for a guy that's not even playing on the floor until he ultimately gets moved. So that's the Cam thing. But one other glaring issue for me is that the Knicks bench is not giving enough of an offensive punch. Quickly has always been inconsistent his entire NBA professional career. He has good games. He has bad games. We don't know what he can give us or expect him to give us on any given night, right? He's up and down all the time. And I like Quick, but he's not a guy that we can depend on to give us what we need. I would much rather have a guy, honestly, that I know will give us 10 to 15 points a game, 5 to 10 assists a game, rather than some herky-jerky performance where a guy can give you maybe 20 plus or 30 plus on a given night, but scores less than 10 on a given night. It's a little confusing. So with that being said, it's become quite clear to me that the Knicks need to make a move. Now, I don't think that the Knicks should go out and make any sort of like home run move, because when you look at our starting lineup, going back to the 5-game winning streak, we were thriving. We had, solidified our starting rotation. Quentin Grimes was inserted into the starter rotation, and we seem to have a sustainable success. So I don't see any move being made to replace any of the starters. The moves should come, or at least I would hope they would come in the bench. So let's take a look at a few guys who I think would actually benefit the Knicks and actually benefit themselves coming to our team. And the first guy that I'm going to throw out there is some guy who, Knicks fans have been, talking about quite a lot lately, and that's Jordan Clarkson. Now, Jordan Clarkson is a guy who I believe he won Sixth Man of the Year a few years ago. I may be mistaken, but he's obviously every year a Sixth Man of the Year candidate. He's always going to be there. He's become more mature over these last few years. Earlier in his career, he had some, maturity issues. I believe he has some off the court issues as well, but, his play has, stepped up, and he's a little bit more mature. He'll still throw hands when need be. He became a meme recently. He was ready to throw hands again against some guy recently. But I like that. And, going back to, the Knicks back in the day, the 90s Knicks, the defensively minded, gritty Knicks, he's a guy that I think fits that criteria. And if you look at the Knicks now, we don't have a dog. We don't have a gritty player that will just, go to bat for guys that get thrown to the ground, ready to give it all, ready to, throw hands. We need players like that. This is New York, for crying out loud. So, not only is his heart and his intensity something that we would benefit from, the guy is actually very skilled. He's a better version of Quickly. Now, Quickly, I believe, said that he models his game after a Lou Will. I would love to have Lou Will, but Lou Will is past his prime at this point. And Jordan Clarkson, I believe he's 30 years old. And he's a guy who I think can give us what we need off the bench, that offensive punch, that intensity, that grit. Now let's take a look at his contract. So he is currently making around 13 mil this season, and he's projected to make 14 mil next season. Now, highlighted in blue, this means that he has a player option. So within the team of Utah, he has the choice of deciding whether he can come back or he doesn't. Now, let's take a look at the Knicks roster. Obviously, we know guys that are on the trade block are Evan Fournier and Derrick Rose, Cam Reddish. Now, at this point, I think we, again, need to consider making a sort of mid-tier move for Jordan Clarkson. And I'll get into another guy who I think we should take a look at. But we need to consolidate this roster. We need to get rid of guys who we know we're not going to be playing anymore, or we know is not going to give us much. So who is a candidate I think that could be moved for Jordan Clarkson? You got Derrick Rose making almost exactly the same amount as Jordan Clarkson. Now, the only difference between Derrick Rose's contract and Jordan Clarkson's contract is that Jordan Clarkson has a player option, whereas Derrick Rose, there's a team option. So if Utah is interested in just clearing that cap space without having to worry about Jordan Clarkson re-upping and still being with the team to take his money, they can be comfortable with the fact of taking on a Derrick Rose and knowing that it's up to them to decide rather than the player to decide whether to keep him or move him. So that's something that they should be willing to entertain. Now, I know the Knicks have a great affinity for Derrick Rose, obviously the Tom Thibodeau relationship. But I think, this is still a move that can be made where the Knicks talk to Derrick Rose and say, hey, we have a deal on the table. They're going to buy you out when they trade for you, and you're free to sign with whoever team you want to sign with. If you're against it, then we won't pull the trigger. I think this is something that the Knicks should be talking with Derrick Rose about and get into his opinion on it. Obviously, we're not going to disrespect D Rose and send him somewhere that he doesn't want to ultimately go. But if it's a situation where it works out best for both the teams and the players, I think this is something that we should entertain. Obviously, you can have other situations where you maybe send Evan Fournier back. Now, Evan is making 18 and Jordan Clarkson is making 14. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between the salaries. But maybe you can entice Utah. Utah is in the process of rebuilding, so they want draft picks. At this point, I would even be willing to throw in one of those protected first rounders, a second rounder, because seriously, what are we doing with these picks at this point? We have all of these picks that are not even high value. They're just protected picks, protected first rounders, second rounders that ultimately aren't going to yield any real, star-studded athletes coming out of college. Let's be real about that. So these assets are just sitting around. Let's start using them. Let's start offsetting to clear some of these guys away, so that way we can, invest in a Jordan Clarkson. I would be willing to, take a gamble on a Jordan Clarkson, even though he has a player option for the following year. Get him into the team. Let's see what happens. Make a playoff push. And if he wants to come back, if things are working out with Jordan Clarkson this year or the remaining of this year, maybe we bring him. He wants to come back next year and we see what happens there. So, ultimately, I think we need to consolidate the roster and start making moves by the trade deadline to have any hopes of, having some success in the playoffs, if that's the direction that we want to go in. Now, I may, get some flack for this, but I think another guy who we should take a look at is Patrick Beverley. Now, Patrick Beverley is washed. I agree with that. We certainly wouldn't be trading for the LA Clippers version of Patrick Beverley, let alone the Minnesota Timberwolves version of Patrick Beverley. But again, he's a guy who's an established veteran. We know what we're getting from Patrick Beverley. Now, he may be a shell of himself at this point, but again, Patrick Beverley is a guy who's a dog. He's gritty. He's tough. He has the tenacity. He'll get into guys. And I like that. Even if Pat Bev is, not having any offensive production out there, I would much rather have Patrick Beverley out there distracting guys, getting in guys' faces, being an annoyance to guys. We need players like that. And, that's something that we've been lacking in this, for the past few years. We don't have that sort of like guy or guys who will get at you if you hurt one of the players on the team. And we need Patrick Beverley like that, and let's look at his contract. He's making 13 mil. So again, you can include a Derrick Rose straight up, or maybe you want to do like a Cam Reddish and Isaiah Hartenstein combination for Patrick Beverley. Isaiah Hartenstein is making around 8. Cam Reddish is making around 6. That almost equates to 13. So you can make a move like that. Again, and this is not saying that like, oh, we are bringing in Jordan Clarkson to save us. We're bringing in a Patrick Beverley to save us. I think the Knicks lack, again, the grit, the toughness. They also lack more veteran presence. Now, I'm more of a fan of letting the youth, play, but I do think we lack some veteran presence to be able to steer the ship when things go wrong. And these are both guys in Jordan Clarkson and Patrick Beverley who both are experienced vets. They know how to play the game. And while they may not be saviors, I think they may be pieces that can benefit us, especially if we're considering making a playoff run this season. So that's my thoughts on that, guys. Again, I'm sure there are other players that we can take a look at other than both Jordan Clarkson and Patrick Beverley. But I think they are both guys who can help us tremendously given the things that we're lacking in at this point of the season. But that's going to be all for the video, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you really think, like me, you agree with me that you think the Knicks really need to make a move to consolidate the roster. Do you agree that we should go after guys like a Jordan Clarkson, like a Patrick Beverley? Or perhaps you think there are some other guys that we should go after before the trade deadline? Or maybe you think we should stand pat. Should we not make moves? Should we just, not lose our heads given the fact that we do have some of our major guys from the roster out? Maybe this is just a blurb in the schedule. When RJ and Jalen come back, maybe we get things back together. But let me know your thoughts, guys. I would be interested to hear what your thoughts are on this matter. But anyway, guys, that's going to be all for the video. Last video of the year, so Happy New Year to everyone. Be safe out there, and catch you guys on the rebound. Peace.